One of the great things about doing this show, amongst many of course, is that we can plot the progress of things over the seasons. We've been following the progress of our next garden since summer 2006. Gosh, we had a busy year that year. It was then just a very new hill garden, which needed planning. However, a year or so later, it's now plush and the growth has taken off. It's a very good example of patience and planning.
Well, it's a new home. It was built about a couple of years ago. It's designed by Shepherd and Rout, by a German chap, by Wolf. It's near the coast, it's on the hill, it's on the Port Hills. So they're exposed to quite a bit of wind. They get the southerly wind, the northwesterly wind. This was all mostly pasture. I'd say generally pasture before, with sheep grazing. But it was very undeveloped. It was just a steep sloping hill and no steps, and it was really quite hard access just to get around the property. Well, the first thing is to get access. Because it's all very well to have a hill property and not have access. With this one we started from the top, put steps in, so we had a way to get down in there. Because otherwise you're scrambling down a bank, and if it rains you're stuck, you're out, you can't get down. And where the easiest way to walk where a sheep would go is where you put the paths. Because otherwise you're forcing nature, and it's working with nature rather than working against it. And so you try and find the natural pathways, and often where people are walking up and down you'll see it's worn, and the grass will be worn down, and that's the ways that you go. Probably the biggest challenge there is the steepness and getting things in there. So a lot of the rock had to be taken down by hand, and you either take down in buckets or carry them down individually, which is quite back-breaking work. Some of the rock came up from the bottom, probably about 10 cubic metres of compost. I'm a big favour of composting. So all that had to be put in the sacks and carried down, and my knees packed in a little bit afterwards, just for carrying stuff and going up and down the steps. It's quite an organic house inside. The house has a lot of concrete inside and quite a bit of timber, exposed timber finishes. On the outside is corrugated iron. There's cedar cladding, and it's set into the hills rather than sitting up above it. And the idea was to plant it and let the trees go around it, so you feel that you're really in the hill rather than perched on top. So they wanted quite an organic garden that was going to fit in with the hill and fit in with the house, and eventually grow up and be trees down the bottom, so you'd look over trees and out to the water. With quite aggressive ground cover planting, so that you wouldn't have to do too much maintenance. It'll be quite a bit of maintenance for 2, maybe 3 years, and then it should be quite infill and there shouldn't be too much work. Very easy to overplant and to crowd out natural features. It's a very New Zealand garden, it's all New Zealand natives. There's also some Brazilinia lucida, which is a very fleshy leaf plant, which we actually got from the west coast, and they can only be grown on the hill. It'll grow into quite a fleshy leaf, bigger tree. And they've been placed out quite widely spaced, so they've got a chance to grow into bigger trees rather than being a hedge. There's a lot of coloured flax, and the flax and the trees should really bring the birds in. There's quite a bit of birds. There's been quite a bit of council planting just down the hill from where we are here, and those plants are establishing. And so the birds, natural like bellbirds and fantails and wax eyes and all those sorts of things, you're providing good habitat for them. These plants will need irrigation for probably 5 years. When we planted this year in December, it was very wet, so they got a lot of natural water. But really, to get the plants established and looking good, they'll need water for the first few years, and then probably only need water really in the summer. They're all quite hardy plants. Quite a few of them are endemic to the Port Hills here. Things like the prosmas and the flaxes and those sorts of things. And so they'll need water initially, but really over time they should need less and less. You can use drippers, which are just little drippers where you run lines around, but I favour on the hill properties, put in big overhead sprayers. You can leave the lines fairly near the surface, so if there's a break or someone digs it up, you can see where it is. So there's probably, I think, 1 sprinkler above the house. There'll be 1, 2 down the side, probably about 3 for the front, and then a couple up through the other side. But they're big overhead, they just broadcast the water. And you usually put it on either very early in the morning or in the evening. And the evening's often best when it's cooled down a bit. A lot of this hill is this lower soil with clay underneath, and when it gets wet, if it doesn't have trees or something holding it together, it tends to slump off. I like the way the property works, and I think it works for the house. And again, in my mind, it's important to do something for the clients, for the people that own the house, because in the end I can do it, I'm there for a month or we're there for 6 weeks doing the work, but at the end of the day we go away and then it's their house, and so it's important that it's good for them because that's the thing that counts at the end of the day, that they get something that they want.